David Cronenberg, one of my all-time favorite directors, probably because of many conversations with my nephew, a young filmmaker. We have had these conversations, and David Cronenberg seems to me to be the most artistic filmmaker, although his films, to me personally, his films aren't up to snuff with his ideas. But there's just something about his movies that every one you watch, you can just tell the same person made it. He's one of the only, if you want to go by the true, what I take to be the true meaning of the French word auteur, is that saving David Cronenberg is probably one of the only real true auteurs in the history of cinema, because he has made some movies that were out of his oeuvre, you might say, but that was only because he might he had trouble, from what I understand, he had trouble raising money for his own movies. So maybe he did some of those movies just for, just for monetary purposes, and he didn't really consider them part of his overall art. Um, but I think the first David Cronenberg movie I actually seen was on pay television. We couldn't get into scanners because it was restricted. That was 1980. So I think the first Cronenberg movie I seen was, they had these things back in the 80s called pay TV, Super Channel, and I think it was First Choice. And they played, for I didn't really like any of the movies they played on those channels, so although we had it in the family, uh, I didn't really watch a lot of movies on there. I just thought they're really kind of like contemporary and just not that good. So um, some girls at my high school had mentioned this movie Shivers. That's what it was called. That's what they played it. It goes by a couple other titles, but that's what it was played here when it first aired on pay television in like '82 or somewhere around there. And I heard these girls told me about this movie called Shivers, and they said you got to see it and that. So I waited till they replayed it on one of the pay TV channels, and I watched it, and yeah, I thought it was. I thought um, I wasn't too savvy back then, but uh, there was just something about it that it was just different from all horror movies. It was just seemed to be so modern, and it used the science in it seemed to be believable. It it uh, it's still probably one of my favorite Cronenberg movies for some reason. Maybe it's just because it was the first one I seen, but um, David Cronenberg, I really, really began to respect him as an artist, because back then I considered film as just starting to get to be art on the same level as all the other arts. And David Cronenberg, I had read some articles about him, so I wanted to go back and see all his other movies that I hadn't seen, like Rabid, The Brood, and Scanners. So I finally went back, and on V8, when they finally came out on VHS, we rented all those movies. Some people didn't like them. Most people like Scanners because it is pretty action packed, and there's a lot of like effects in it, gore effects in it, that for the gore the upstart gore hounds, I should say, back then, because that's really where the concept of a gore hound started. I mean, like in the VHS days, that's what precipitated that, because before that, like you think about it, what have all these people seen that even compares to the gore we've seen on the even the cut films? You still got to see quite a bit of blood in that. So David Cronenberg, to me, his movies just had a more creepier, believable way of the way these things could happen. They weren't just some kind of monster living in the basement or something like that. They were just, they seem to use science, whether it's pseudoscience or not isn't the point. They seem to use science to explain the pretext of the film. But the movie that really did it for me for David Cronenberg was, of course, Videodrome. When I told you, I always, even very young, watching movies and that, I explained earlier that I for some reason I always liked movies that I didn't understand them. I didn't know what they were about, and I kind of sensed back then that I could watch these movies repeatedly and repeatedly. But when I seen David Cronenberg's Videodrome, it just totally,
We got 5 minutes left.
okay, it just totally did something to me, and I wouldn't even be able to explain it. It just, in the terms of the science fiction author Robert Heinlein, we just grokked it. We knew what it was about. We had heard second or third handedly the theories of people like Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian media prophet. By that time, I was already had heard about the theories of the situationists in France, like Guy Debord, his book, his manifesto, the Society of the Spectacle. I had already heard about the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard back then, and his theories about living in a simulation and that. And in Videodrome just seemed to bring all that together. And like the character in the film, Dr. Brian Oblivion, I think it is. He's based on all those guys, and not only is he based on all those guys, like Cronenberg kind of even transcended some of the things they were saying with what his Doctor Brian Oblivion was saying in Videodrome. And like I don't think that movie Videodrome could ever have the same effect on people now as it did back then, because like I mean like we were only about a year or two into like seeing like a home VHS tapes, home video, and that, and and like a year later, the guy lays that on us. It's like, like, wow, why are we watching these VHS tapes? They're gonna kill us. They're gonna turn us into automatons. We we believed that. We believed in Cronenberg. The guy was like the guy was like the new techno prophet of the age. And then, so Videodrome was the last Cronenberg movie that I can say I really, really loved and still watch like all the time. Um, and So all his movies after that, I liked, like Naked Lunch, and I liked his version of Crash, J.G. Ballard's Crash. I did like that, but he really he didn't really have the same impact on me as those first five movies he's seen, or first five movies he did. But I was able to I bought his movie that's considered outside his oeuvre called Fast Company. I bought the DVD of that, and it um, I I I had totally forgotten about the two underground movies that he made because I totally forgot about them because I thought I ain't never gonna see those, man. And this movie Fast Company I bought, I don't know how long ago, like 12 years ago or whatever, it had them both on it, Stereo and Crimes of the Future. And they just, these movies totally blew me away. They just, everything's there that went into his first five movies.